Hey guys, another video for the Wild Child Project. This one is just a standalone mini lesson, and it's also a nod to the upcoming reboot series. The point of this mini lesson is to let curiosity lead. I called it Look, Listen, and Touch, and I'm going to show 3 examples of how curiosity can let you have an unstructured educational opportunity with your kids or yourself. There's no need for rigid classroom guides or learning outcomes. You can tap into the natural, human, curious spirit, which every kid has in abundance unless they're sick or depressed, and let that guide what happens. All you've got to do is be there as a guide and a protector from any kind of harm for the kids, and just see what happens, see what they find, look, listen, touch. There needs to be no answers. This is really more about the questions, the provocation of curiosity. And nature is abundant with rich little details and ways of piquing that interest and getting you to ask questions. So like a good Montessori instructor, you're not going to give answers, you're going to provoke that natural curiosity. And we'll go ahead and cut ahead into the first example. So let's go ahead with our first scene, and on my little walk I found this giant pile of wood chips just laying at the base of this white pine tree. This would be a great opportunity to just go up with a kid and just start asking questions. They might beat you to it. What is this? What do you think did this? I mean, it looks honestly like a human machine made it. It's a great way to get in there, get tactile, smell the smell of the wood chips themselves, look around, let them climb around in the mess. If you notice, we follow our eyes up the tree and there's these long streaks of sap and they're running from the source, these huge holes. Now, you might guess that a woodpecker made this, and you'd be right. Specifically, it's the pileated woodpecker, which is the largest in North America, I believe. But you don't need to know that answer, and you don't even need to get to the answer. They might come up with some other answer, like maybe an owl made it, maybe something did it for a burrow, and you don't have to know. You might be able to get up there if you're into climbing trees with your kid and poke your head in there. There's lots of little bug holes, and that's how you can get to the closer to the answer. Something might have been hunting for bugs. And if you're running short on time, if this is a day class or you just get impatient with your kid, you can go and pull up the internet. I'll throw these YouTubers links on the screen here. There's a couple of really good videos. This one is just a pileated woodpecker. Big old dinosaur looking thing. They make a big hooting call that sounds like Woody the Woodpecker. The other one is this time lapse, which shows the actual process of how much damage these things can do. And I shouldn't use the word damage. They're not actually hurting the tree. These cavities have already been made by colonies of insects in the rotten part of the tree. The tree's still living. It's almost like they're removing the infection in some ways, but those connections are often more complex than we give them credit for. Let's go on to the next scene then. And I was going along and I started seeing animal tracks in the snow, and the snow was starting to melt, and so it also had gotten pretty hard. It had a nice hard glaze. This shot's a little washed out, but you can probably tell that my hand's sliding on the surface of the hard ice. And what I've actually found is a fresher deer track. I spooked the deer in the woods. And if you look, this is a great way to get kids interacting with all their senses and start thinking about seeing time in nature. Tracking, the art of tracking, is very ancient. As a species, we figured out there's so much information in a track when you really know how to look. Some people believe it's the thing that led to us being able to recognize symbols and then therefore learn to read and speak. So I'm going ahead and I'm scratching the surface of this hard snow because I want you to see how the flakes, the little, how when you scratch the surface it gets soft and powdery. So if you actually put your hand into the track and you notice, oh wow, look, this stuff's pretty loose. This probably just happened. Whereas if I go to another older track, this deeper one, it's actually sunken into the snow. It's very smooth. I can feel the contours. There's little bits of tree debris sitting on top of it. This gives us a sense of time. This tells us This is a much older track. I scrape the nearby snow that's kind of getting soft in the sun, and it crackles. So here's another one. Feeling in there, knowing there is that it's smooth, and this hasn't happened at all recently. Little bits of debris. Here's a track. Now I'm going to go ahead and touch it. I'm mapping it out in my brain. Our ability to map stuff with our sense of touch is so much stronger than we give credit for. We often attribute almost superpowers to blind people that can read with Braille. Now look, I found the snow's loose, and look, I find a little white hair. It's even more evidence that this is a fresher track. Also, looking at the toes, unlike the previous one, which had the toes pointing together, these ones are spread apart, almost like a human giving the peace sign. You can ask your kids, why do you think that is? What do you think? Why do you think it left that kind of an impression? Or why is it this shape now instead of a different shape? Through a little bit of studying, you'll know that the cloven hooves of a deer spread apart like that when it's running. And the snow's a little washed out in this picture, but I was pointing at the distance between each footprint. It's much more spread out than the walking footprints. Pull up this little video here of some white-tailed deer in a person's backyard getting spooked and then bolting through the forest. You might pull videos up like that when you're learning and showing your kids or yourself to see how the animal moves differently at different speeds. That's just another layer of information you can find when looking at tracks on the ground. It's a great winter activity. If you happen to be in an arid climate with lots of sand or desert, maybe you live near a beach, it's a great way to learn more sophisticated tracking techniques. Cultures in the southwestern United States and the Kalahari Desert Bushmen of Africa have developed world-famous, sophisticated tracking understanding. They can tell the gender, the age, the stress level, what the animal's doing. There's just a rich amount of information, and the only way to get started, I think it's Tom Brown Jr. that calls it dirt time. It's just getting down on your hands and knees and looking at the ground and touching, mapping out that three-dimensional shape in your brain, and just building up a profile in your mind of what you're looking at. You learn to start seeing time, chronology, the age of a track. You learn how the elements affect the track over time. So much there. And you should be able to start finding tracks everywhere. One of the benefits of it is often people going to the woods are too loud, or we smell too strongly, make too much noise, move too quickly, and we spook away most of the wildlife, so you don't really see anything. And tracking is a good way for kids and yourself to start realizing what kind of community of wildlife you have in the nature around you, because that stuff gets left behind like a calling card. All right, and the last little exercise is more about listening. And I get back to my parents' house, and my dad he has a bunch of bird feeders, and they're pretty active. And so I get back on this sunny winter day, and the birds are just going at it. And there's chickadees, and there's some little gray bird that I don't know what it is. And they're all singing and chirping. There's a lot to learn in bird language. I'm just going to show a really simple exercise here for learning to listen a little better when you're out in the woods and you're looking for animals. It's pretty simple. You've probably done it naturally on your own. It's just cupping your ears, knowing that sound is waves. We can catch these waves and funnel them into our ears like animals do. Now what I'm doing is I'm looking for this bird in a tree, and I'm turning my head around, pointing one side of my head and the other at the tree, listening for subtle variations in loudness. So I tilt my head up, I start cocking it one side to the other. It seems weird, but you can notice animals doing this, and I'll cut to some foxes doing it in a minute. But tilting and pitching your head like that You start strengthening your ears and developing a sensitivity to listen for subtle differences in loudness. It helps you if you're in the thick forest, for example, listening to bird calls. You develop a sensitivity that lets you hear which side of your head is getting more of the noise. So as you tilt your head side to side and up and down, you're pinpointing where the bird is based solely on sound. Again, it's a little weird, but it's something you can play around with right away and start feeling the effect of it, and hopefully you get good. There's probably some games that we can go into later that incorporate these exercises, but I'll get to that when I get to the ear and listening section of Reboot, which is a series I have coming up in this playlist.